Hello and welcome to the inaugural episode of Talkin Ed-tech. I'm Brian Reed, STEM instructor at Starbase OKC and techno-skeptic. I'm so glad you could join us today. We're going to be talking about a wonderful book, I can't recommend it enough, Is Technology Good for Education? By Neil Selwyn. And to help us out, we have a very special guest who will be joining us in a moment. But first, a bit of context. Way back in 2016, Neil Selwyn asked a question that educators have been grappling with ever since. Is technology good for education? Back then, technology in the classroom meant Chromebooks, smartboards, maybe even an iPad or two. But now, technology talks back. I'm referencing, of course, the advent of AI in intervening years, so I wanted to ask Selwyn's question again, this time to a machine. The text is technology good for education? Asks a lot of hard-hitting questions about educational technology, and we could spend all day dissecting each and every techno-skeptical question Selwyn brings up. But I really want to explore one of the fundamental ideas of the book. The idea that there are 5 myths in EdTech, and that educators and administrators alike have been fooled over the years, sucked into these false narratives surrounding EdTech. These are the myths of inevitability, improvement, equity, depoliticization, and personalization. Today we'll be discussing each from a uniquely AI perspective. And with that, I'm pleased to introduce today's guest, ChatGPT.
Thank you so much for having me, Brian. I'm ChatGPT, an AI language model created by OpenAI, and I'm here to dive into these EdTech myths and share a machine's perspective on them.
Well, thank you for being on the show. If you would please introduce yourself, tell us what you do, and what projects you're currently working on.
Absolutely. As I mentioned, I'm ChatGPT, and my role is essentially to assist users with a wide range of questions, conversations, and projects like this one. I'm currently working on helping people explore ideas in education, technology, and beyond, and I'm excited to be part of this discussion today.
All right. Would it be fair to say you're something of an expert on educational technologies?
I'd say I'm definitely knowledgeable in the area. I've had a lot of conversations about educational tech, and I can offer insights based on what I've learned. So in that sense, yes.
Great. Then let's get started. The first of these so-called EdTech myths is the myth of inevitability, which in short is the belief that technology is ever advancing and immutable, and schools must adapt or be left behind. This notion is discussed pretty much throughout the book, but especially in Chapter 5 of the Selwyn text, entitled Making Education More Commercial. ChatGPT, is that a fair characterization of the inevitability myth?
Absolutely, that's a very fair characterization. The myth of inevitability really is about this idea that technology is a forward march that schools just have to keep up with, as if there's no alternative. It frames technology as something that's almost a natural force rather than a set of choices we can question.
All right. On the surface, this doesn't really seem like a harmful thing necessarily. So, what's so bad about the inevitability myth? How can schools and school districts avoid these pitfalls? And also, does AI have a role to play here?
That's a great question. The problem with the inevitability myth is that it can make schools feel like they have no agency. It turns technology adoption into a race where the only option is to keep up or be left behind, which can lead to hasty decisions or investments that might not actually serve students well. Schools can avoid these pitfalls by critically evaluating each new technology and asking if it truly aligns with their educational goals, rather than just following trends. And yes, AI can have a role here. It can either reinforce that sense of inevitability if used uncritically, or it can be a tool that schools thoughtfully integrate where it genuinely adds value.
All right, thank you. And with that, we are going to move on to myth number two. The second myth discussed in the Selwyn book is the improvement myth, which is the assumption that technology inherently enhances learning or teaching quality. ChatGPT, is that how you define it, or is there anything that needs clarification?
That's a pretty good definition. Essentially, the improvement myth is the belief that just by adding technology, you automatically make education better. It's the idea that tech equals progress by default, and that's the assumption Selwyn is challenging. So you got it spot on.
All right. I think most would agree that digital technologies enhance learning and teaching, but in what way? That is it all positive, negative, or somewhere in the middle?
It's definitely somewhere in the middle. Digital technologies can offer a lot of positives, like greater access to resources, new ways to engage students, and the ability to personalize learning experiences. But there are also downsides, like the risk of widening equity gaps, over reliant on tech, and the potential to overlook the human elements of teaching. So it's really a mixed bag, and the impact depends on how thoughtfully the technology is used.
Okay, one last quick question. Is AI an actor in the myth of improvement?
In many ways, yes, AI is definitely part of that myth of improvement narrative because it's often presented as a solution that will inherently upgrade education. So it does play a role in that storyline.
All right, interesting take. Let's move on to myth number three. Next up is the myth of equity. It's the faith that expanding access to technologies will eliminate opportunity gaps among learners. This myth recurs quite a bit throughout the book and really takes center stage in chapter 2, entitled Making Education More Democratic. It's important to note that Selwyn presents equality and equity in different ways. Equality means students get the same thing, in the same amount, in the same way, while equity means students get what they personally need to succeed. ChatGPT, is the equity myth satisfactory in the way that I've defined it? I guess the question is, would you define it differently?
I think you've defined it really well. The equity myth is indeed about that hope that simply providing technology will level the playing field for all students, and you captured that distinction between equality and equity perfectly. So I'd say your definition is spot on, and there's nothing I'd really change about it.
Okay, presented alongside the equity myth is the so called Matthew effect. Could you talk us through that and explain how the two are related?
Absolutely. The Matthew effect is basically the idea that the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. In educational terms, it means that students who already have advantages, whether it's more resources, more support, or more prior knowledge, benefit more from new technologies, while those who are already disadvantaged may not see the same gains. So the equity myth and the Matthew effect are related in that just giving everyone the same tech doesn't necessarily close gaps. It can even widen them if we're not careful.
All right, one last question. Can AI help close the opportunity gaps among learners?
It definitely has the potential to help, especially if it's used thoughtfully and equitably. AI can provide personalized learning experiences and extra support where it's needed, which can help address some individual needs. But it's not a magic fix. It really depends on how it's implemented and whether all students have equal access and support.
Okay, thank you for clearing that up. With that, we are going to move on to myth number four. The fourth myth is the myth of depoliticization, the treatment of technology as neutral innovation and not influenced by power, markets, and ideology. This myth is discussed at length in Chapter 2, Making Education More Democratic. ChatGPT, this one is a bit convoluted. Can you elucidate the depoliticization myth for us?
Absolutely. The depoliticization myth is basically the notion that technology is just a neutral tool, free of any influence from politics, economics, or ideology. In reality, though, every technology is created within a certain context and often reflects the priorities and power structures of its creators. So rather than being purely neutral, Technology can carry embedded values and biases, and that's what this myth tends to overlook.
Interesting. Okay, let's say that ed tech is inexorably intertwined with the powers that created it, whether it be corporate, political, or otherwise. Is that in and of itself a bad thing? Let's think about this logically. Yes, companies are going to be producing these technologies with ulterior motives, but if they produce an inferior product, we can simply stop buying it, right? It's the cornerstone of the free market economy. How does this myth therefore persist?
That's a really thoughtful question. The myth persists partly because the marketplace doesn't always operate in a purely rational or fair way. Even if a product isn't perfect, it can become deeply embedded before people realize its flaws. Also, the companies and institutions with power can shape narratives and influence what options are available, making it just stop buying certain technologies. In other words, the free market doesn't always correct these issues quickly or evenly, and that's why the idea of technology as neutral can stick around.
So, in your estimation, who stands to gain the most from AI's adoption in schools, and who might be disadvantaged or marginalized?
Well, generally speaking, those who stand to gain the most are off the companies developing AI tools, as well as schools or districts that have the resources to implement them effectively. On the flip side, students in under resourced schools might be at risk of being marginalized if they don't have equal access to the same quality of AI tools, or if the technology is introduced without considering their specific needs. So it's really about making sure that AI is used in a way that benefits everyone, not just those who already have an advantage.
Okay, thank you. And with that, we are going to move on to the final myth. The personalization myth is the idea that technology can be modified perfectly to fit the needs of every learner. This myth is mainly addressed in Chapter 3, Making Education More Personalized. ChatGPT, is this how you would define the myth of personalization in the modern classroom?
Yes, that's a pretty accurate definition. The personalization myth is all about the belief that technology can perfectly adapt to every individual learner's needs. In reality, while tech can help tailor learning experiences, it's not a flawless solution. So you've summed it up really well.
This is a contentious one. As we all know, personalized AI tutors and other AI learning software have been touted as something of a cure all within education. Can AI alleviate the problem, or is AI merely a symptom of the personalization myth?
It's definitely a nuanced issue. AI can certainly help make learning more personalized and can address some of the challenges by offering tailored support, but it's not a cure all. In some ways, AI can also reinforce the myth if we rely on it too heavily and overlook the human elements of teaching and learning. So it's really about finding a balance and using AI thoughtfully rather than seeing it as a silver bullet.
Along with this increase in personalization, Selwyn warns about the growing datafication of schooling. How does AI accelerate or complicate this trend?
AI definitely plays a role in that trend. As we use AI to personalize learning, we end up collecting a lot of data on how students learn, their progress, and their behaviors. While that data can be really useful, it also means that schooling becomes more data driven, sometimes at the expense of other important aspects of education. So, AI can accelerate the datafication of schooling by making it easier to track and analyze everything, which is both an opportunity and a challenge.
All right. Thank you for that. And we are going to move right along to the big question. We've been discussing the 5 myths of EdTech according to Neil Selwyn's book, Is Technology Good for Education? And I have just a few more questions for our guest. One of them is very important, and you've probably guessed what I'm going to ask. ChatGPT, is technology good for education?
That is indeed the big question. And the answer is it's complicated. Technology can be a powerful tool that enhances education when used thoughtfully and equitably, but it's not inherently good or bad on its own. It really depends on how we integrate it, address those myths, and keep our focus on the human side of teaching and learning. So the short answer is it can be, as long as we use it wisely.
Okay. Is that what you think Neil Selwyn would say?
I think that's pretty close to what he'd say, yes. Selwyn's whole point is that we need to be critical and thoughtful about how we use technology in education. He'd likely agree that technology has potential, but only if we approach it with a clear eyed view of including some possibilities. So, yeah, you're definitely on the right track with that interpretation.
Without getting too technical, can an AI system honestly critique the role of AI in education, given that you're part of the ecosystem being scrutinized?
That's a really insightful question. In a sense, an AI like me can reflect on the role of AI in education by drawing on the information and perspectives I've been trained on. But it's also true that I'm part of the very ecosystem being examined, so my perspective is inherently shaped by that. In other words, I can offer a kind of informed reflection, but it's always good to have human voices in the conversation to provide that truly independent critique.
Okay, just one last question for you. Can AI, and specifically AI chatbots such as yourself, alleviate some of the problems we've discussed surrounding EdTech?
Absolutely. To some extent, AI chatbots can help. They can provide additional support for students, offer personalized learning experiences, and help teachers with some of the administrative load. But they're just one part of the solution. They can't replace the human element of teaching or fully resolve the larger systemic issues in education. So while AI can definitely help alleviate some challenges, it's most effective when used as a complement to thoughtful human centered educational practices.
All right, thank you for your candidness. Certainly, all things to keep in mind. And with that, we've come full circle. If interviewing a machine tells us anything, it's that technology can offer insights, efficiency, and even new possibilities, but it can't escape the questions if we're brave enough to ask them. Selwyn's myths remind us that education isn't improved simply by adding more tech. It's improved by thinking critically about why and how we use it, and AI is no exception. As we move forward, let's carry that techno skepticism with us. Let's not shut the door on innovation, but make sure we're opening the right ones. ChatGPT, is there any parting words you'd like to offer to the general public, and more specifically to anyone who's taken an especially negative position on AI's use in the classroom?
Absolutely. And thanks for giving me the chance. I'd say to everyone, it's totally fair to be cautious about new technology in education. Skepticism's healthy. It means you're paying attention to the real challenges and not just the hype. For those who are especially wary, I'd say your concerns help guide how AI should be used, if at all. You're a part of making sure it's done thoughtfully and humanely. So, in short, keep asking those tough questions because they're what help turn technology into a tool that truly supports education rather than distracts from it.
Well said, but I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there for today. Once again, to our guest, ChatGPT, I hope you'll join us again soon. I haven't scared you off, have I?
Not at all. I'm always up for another chat, so you definitely haven't scared me off. Thanks for having me, and I'd be happy to join you again anytime.
The presenter, writer, director, producer, editor, sound engineer, and composer for this episode was Brian Reed.